the eyes of the world focused on the horror, Russia's war against Ukraine. Entire cities shelled and decimated. Families ripped apart. Young and old standing up to fight for their country. Resilient, united, defiant, and free. Inspiring the world with their courage. Tonight, News 8 presents Ukraine Crisis, Connecticut's Response. Here are Lisa Carberg and Dennis House.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Over the next hour, we are going to highlight the helpers.
They are the people from Connecticut who crossed an ocean to help strangers, and we'll get you up to date on efforts to bring Ukrainian refugees here to our state.
We will also tell you about Connecticut's strong ties to Ukraine, the lessons that can be learned from history, and we will introduce you to the beautiful, vibrant culture the Ukrainian community is fighting to protect in this time of war.
But first, we want to bring you up to speed on what is happening on the ground in Ukraine right now.
An urgent evacuation of people from a city described as a hellscape. Russian forces laying siege to Mariupol. Survivors reporting that the Russian military deprived them of food and water in an effort to force the Ukrainian military to surrender. An estimated 100,000 people are still trapped in the city. People have been waiting 4 hours in line just for bread. They've had no running water and very little hope until now. It looks like the Red Cross and other agencies may finally be able to evacuate people after Russia agreed to open a humanitarian corridor. In other areas of the country, intense fighting continues. Multiple missiles hit the capital of Kyiv Thursday. ABC's James Longman witnessed this.
We just heard an enormous explosion here towards the north of where we're standing. You can see there deep, dark smoke rising into the sky. Now, we're not sure what's been hit.
Thousands of Ukrainian civilians have been killed or injured, and Ukraine will feel the impact for years, even decades to come. The cost of the damage to the country's infrastructure has reached an estimated $63 billion, according to an analysis by the Kyiv School of Economics. The Ukrainian government's estimate is nearly double that. And the largest humanitarian crisis Europe has seen in a generation. More than 4 million people have left Ukraine since Russia invaded. 6 million plus displaced within Ukraine. Roughly a quarter of the population uprooted from their homes.
A Middletown woman worked to get her sister, niece, and nephew out of Ukraine.
They are now safe here in Connecticut. News 8's Samaya Hernandez has their story.
5-year-old Daniel loves Hot Wheels. His 3-year-old sister Elizabeth likes princess books. But these resilient kiddos have seen things kids shouldn't see.
These are war kids. That's what they call them in Ukraine.
These war kids and their 27-year-old mother, Victoria Zakidna, spent 10 days in western Ukraine after Russian attacks began. Her sister Mariana began pressuring her to flee before the conflict broke out.
I would listen to American news and what would, American politics say, and what they were saying was not really aligning with what she was saying.
Never did she imagine leaving behind her husband, father, and belongings to travel 13 hours on a bus, passing a row of vehicles, watching women and children on foot, and hearing stories of children who froze to death en route to the Polish border.
This is so sad. They die for nothing.
Now, the hardest part, overcoming survivors' guilt.
Why do I get to have this and those people are dying? And it was really devastating for me. Why do people have to die? Why do kids have to die? This is not a war, this is a terrorism. That is my personal opinion.
Despite everything, Victoria is in awe of what Connecticut has already done for her family in just 3 days, donating clothes, books, beds, items community members brought to the Ukrainian National Home in Hartford.
That means a lot. I see how people united. Doesn't matter nationality, language.
In Middletown, Samaya Hernandez, News 8.
President Biden is pledging to allow 100,000 Ukrainian refugees into the U.S.
I sat down with Governor Lamont in West Hartford to learn whether Ukrainian refugees will be coming to Connecticut. First of all, Governor, when you see the images from Ukraine, what goes through your mind? The suffering and so forth.
Ukrainians are such an amazing people. They had so much going in their country, and to have Putin come in and invade the way he does in a merciless, brutal way. I love the Ukrainians. They're standing up. They're champions. They're fighting for their survival. They're fighting for their independence, fighting for their liberty. And I'm glad they're giving them the tools they need to defend themselves. A lot of the Ukrainian Americans have, come up to me and said thank you for speaking out on behalf of my family, my friends, my compatriots back in Kyiv and beyond. We have a good-sized Ukrainian population here, Dennis, and when the president asked if there's some Ukrainian refugees who need to be placed in the United States of America, I think Connecticut will be right there.
How many do you think we can handle, and are there certain cities and towns where you'd like to see them go?
I think we ended up with 700 or 800 Afghanis who came. The vets were standing right with them, and I think we can at least handle that number or more when it comes to Ukrainians. We have Ukrainian populations in New Britain and New Haven. We're reaching out to families and Ukrainians now, so if asked, we'll be ready.
What is your message to a Ukrainian refugee who may be watching this online in terms of coming to Connecticut? What can you tell them about our state?
This is a welcoming state. We're so proud of our Ukrainian population. We're so proud of the people from around the world who decided Connecticut is a place that they want to call home. I really hope that you have a chance to go back to your home in Ukraine. But that being said, you're welcome in the United States. You're welcome in Connecticut.
What is your message to the people of Connecticut? What should people in Connecticut be doing to support the people in Ukraine?
One, support our local refugee agency, Syrian Iris. They're going to need some support. We're going to need housing. They're going to need other things. Secondly, we got AmeriCares. We got Save the Children, and a lot of direct support going right to Poland as well as Ukraine to help the people on the ground. They need our help.
Governor Lamont. Yale New Haven Children's Hospital is one of 40 children's hospitals across the country asked to help treat Ukrainian children when they arrive in Connecticut.
And the hospital leaders say they welcomed the invitation and started preparing immediately. They're also monitoring the unfolding situation. The hospital's executive director says there are a host of logistical issues the children from Ukraine must go through before arriving here.
Safe transportation, including screening at the Ukraine end of things as to the children who will benefit the most and at the same time have the greatest chance of surviving a transportation of this kind.
She says that Yale New Haven Children's Hospital has helped children from other countries in the past, so they are well prepared.
The images out of Ukraine and Poland are heartbreaking, and seeing the suffering in person is even more difficult.
A photographer whose byline appeared in the Hartford Courant for 20 years knows this all too well.
Patrick Raycraft recently made the journey to the Polish-Ukrainian border. He was hired as a freelance photographer for actor Sean Penn's nonprofit CORE. He spent 10 days documenting the largest emergency migration since World War II.
We were really on the move. My job was to document the effort by CORE, and so it's a little different in my work as a journalist, perhaps, where I wouldn't really hunker down at one particular place. For example, at a border crossing for an extended period. So we were in and out on the move. They were assessing the needs of the different Polish potential partners that they were meeting along the border. I was just trying to do the best I could to document the human condition.
Raycraft is a hardened journalist, but he told me seeing these images was very difficult for him.
A woman from Manchester has been working tirelessly in Ukraine and Poland.
She's helping provide medical, humanitarian, and support to the people who need them most.
There's a great deficit right now of regular medicines and medical supplies throughout the country. Therefore, we have organizational partners that have been supporting us with donations. We use these funds to buy medical supplies which are in deficit in Ukraine abroad, and then ship them first to Lviv, where we sort them and then distribute them through smaller shipments that we can send to cities all over the country.
She's volunteering for the organization Community Self-Help. They also fight disinformation about the war by giving daily reports describing what it is like on the ground in Ukraine.
One Connecticut hospital system has some Ukrainian natives on staff, so they learned firsthand about what it's like being here with loved ones overseas.
Doctors at Middlesex Health took action collecting money for Doctors Without Borders and a nonprofit that helps those in need in Ukraine with medicine and supplies.
Generosity from Connecticut helping on the front lines in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Violetta Germanovich works in the lab at Middlesex Hospital. Her mother lives alone in Ukraine.
I'm in constant contact with her, of course, and I'm checking on her. I ask her to send me at least something twice a day before and after she is awake, I'm awake.
Her mother is in western Ukraine, not currently near a battle zone. Still, it's frightening.
It's often raids and sirens. Nobody knows how it's going to end.
She told leaders at Middlesex Health about this Connecticut nonprofit, Maidan United, raising money for Ukraine. This picture shows Violetta on the right next to Middlesex President Vincent Capice as he presents a $10,000 check to the group for humanitarian help in Ukraine. Middlesex Health surgeon Grigory Klimovich is also from Ukraine and has more than 100 cousins there.
Lots of cousins, they are fighting the war. Some of them are in Kiev area, but a lot of them are staying regionally and kind of preparing for the war.
Dr. Michael Cerullo is the medical staff president of Middlesex Health and proud of how generously his doctors pitched in for the donation.
I am privileged to be able to represent and serve this community of physicians because they really are wonderful to work with and they are so committed to the community that we practice in.
An accomplished violinist and UConn professor born in Ukraine finds inspiration in her native country.
Dr. Solomia Ivakiv has been using her talents to help raise money for relief efforts. She shared her journey with News 8 chief photographer Mike Piskorski.
So growing up was interesting. I grew up in Soviet Ukraine and people wanted to be free from the Soviet Union and from communism. I'm the generation of people who still stood in line to buy a loaf of bread for 6 hours. We had no hot water because that's what communists did. They tried to keep people poor and oppressed, and then people would be afraid to revolt. I came to the States in 1997 to study at the world-famous conservatory, Curtis Institute of Music. My dream was to travel the world, to have friends in every country, and I'm living my dream. I go at least 3 times a year because I do a lot of projects with Ukrainian orchestras. Keep a very close connection with Ukrainian musicians and with the musical life in Ukraine. Ukraine was lovely. It was very nice to come and visit. Many tourists would come to Ukraine and experience Ukraine for themselves. Ukraine was on a path to become a Western European country. Sadness. And I'm in disbelief that there is no respect for human life and the atrocities that are being done to the people. Everything is unpredictable and we don't know what to expect. And we fear the worst. I wanted to thank average American for thinking about Ukraine and for praying and sending good wishes. I hope that the world leaders will take charge and will be a little bit more determined in stopping the evil and not just letting Ukrainians take care of a huge worldwide problem that we are all facing.
The war in Ukraine has featured some heavy rhetoric about Nazis opening up old wounds for Holocaust survivors. Russian President Putin first claimed he was invading Ukraine to denazify the country, a narrative that's widely seen as false and slanderous. Others have compared Putin's invasion to when Hitler invaded Poland, triggering World War II. At least 2 Holocaust memorial sites have been hit by Russian forces. Ukraine President Zelensky, who is Jewish and had family members killed in the Holocaust, accuses Russia of trying to erase Ukrainians, their country, and their history. Ukraine played a role in the Holocaust as many Jews from Poland fled there, trying to escape the Nazis.
A retired doctor in West Hartford shares the story of his childhood in Ukraine with News 8's Sarah Cody and explains how the current war is bringing back some painful memories.
When someone else is being afflicted, we must not keep silent. We have to speak up.
Leon Chamides says this from the heart.
This is my father, my older brother, and I, and my mother.
His feelings the result of a history that's both tragic and hopeful.
This picture was taken in 1938, and a year before the war started.
World War II changed everything for Chamides.
Tanks speed the advance as a Polish town is about to fall.
Then a 3-year-old Jewish boy in southwestern Poland.
Before the day is out, the Nazis have occupied the town, which is still burning and in complete ruin.
He experienced his first glimpse of anti-Semitism in 1941.
A lot of shooting, a lot of beating, a lot of humiliation. I remember the screams, and I remember my grandmother whose teeth were knocked out and her face was bloodied. So I remember those incidences. I remembered being terrified and sitting in a cellar. And by 1942, it was obviously clear to my parents that the intent was to kill every Jew. And children were particularly vulnerable.
So his father used a connection he had with an archbishop in a Catholic church in the Ukrainian city of Lviv.
He approached him and asked him whether he would hide his 2 children.
This family would never be together again. And a 7-year-old boy was in a totally new environment, learning a new language, a new religion.
These 2 boys are also Jewish.
Confused and scared.
I suddenly had to learn how to speak Ukrainian.
Wow.
I had to pretend I was given a new name. My name was Lev Kochaminsky, and I had to go over it over and over again in my mind, and actually, because I was afraid if I was suddenly woken up in the middle of the night and someone said, "What's your name?" I would blurt out my real name.
At 9 years old, he started helping a physician's assistant in a makeshift hospital at the church.
I would go into the forest and try to find dead soldiers, particularly if they were German soldiers, because they always had first aid kits and we had nothing.
Life was frightening, but Chamides survived and will always be grateful to the Ukrainian monks who helped raise him.
I always say that they obviously risked their lives to save me.
His brother also escaped, but his parents died at the hands of the Nazis. After the monastery, Chamides was taken in by a woman who also lost her family. They moved to England, then New York, where he went to medical school, eventually becoming a pediatric cardiologist at Hartford Hospital.
That little boy who was hiding in the attic of this schoolhouse.
As an adult, he traveled, researched his past, and wrote a book about his lost family.
These are all the people in the family who are mentioned in the biography who were victims of the Holocaust.
And another translating articles he found written by his dad.
They gave me an idea of what he was about, what his thought process was.
Chamides, now 86, is very affected by the current war in Ukraine, especially by the footage of refugees.
I remember sleeping in that train station all night waiting for a train to evacuate me out to Poland.
But he is proud of Ukraine and hopes the changes he's seen help to strengthen the country that meant so much to his absolutely incredible life.
It's a real tragedy for the Ukrainian people. It's a tragedy for humanity. What pleases me so much is that how much aid is being given to the Ukrainians and how they are being received with open arms in Poland and Romania and Hungary and so on. And we were totally abandoned by our environment. We had no friends. So to see that gives me hope that perhaps the world has changed.
In West Hartford, Sarah Cody, News 8.
Amazing survival story.
I want to read that book.
It's a great story. Wow. Well, we'd like to recognize the grassroots efforts happening across Connecticut.
Julie Cremay grew up in Kiev and now lives in Putnam. She organized this donation drive at the Woodstock Evangelical Catholic Church. The Quiet Corner really came through, donating much-needed clothing, medical supplies, and packaged food.
The Yevshin Ukrainian Vocal Ensemble is a Hartford-based adult choir established in 1996.
Recorded at the historic St. Peter and St. Paul Ukrainian Catholic Church in Ansonia, this song is called Live On, Ukraine. As Ukrainian refugees started pouring into neighboring countries, half a world away, 2 women in Connecticut realized they wanted to do their part to help.
And News 8's Eva Zamaris spoke with the woman who chose to travel to Poland to help their homeland.
She crossed the border. She walked with those 3 kids.
At her apartment in Warsaw, Poland, Anna Kopolars is providing refuge and housing to a family from Ukraine.
And it happened that I was next to them. And we start talking like, if you need help, they can stay in my apartment.
They left, taking only what they could.
Everyone is running with a small bag to cross the border. Like the line is like a miles of waiting. That's how many refugees are coming.
Once the war started, Anna knew she had to help. So she traveled from her home in Berlin, Connecticut, to her home country of Poland, where many Ukrainians have fled. Joining her in this humanitarian aid is a friend from Connecticut, Dr. Isabella Marchek.
So this is what we are together with Anna doing. We are trying to help these people.
Together, they traveled to see a young girl who has a rare type of childhood cancer. She and her mother fled from Ukraine to Poland, but can no longer access the medication she needs. Isabella and Anna are stepping in before her life-saving drug runs out.
There is not only Paulina, but there is so many children that need help. And also the medication, there's like this shortage of medication in hospitals.
Their efforts on the ground will only continue, thanks to the support of organizations, such as the Polish-American Foundation of Connecticut.
I hope that soon it will be better and the situation would be better.
Anna helped make sandwiches to bring to Warsaw Central, the main train station in town, to feed other refugees. Oksana, the mother who's now living with Anna, says she's overwhelmed with gratitude.
But she's very glad that she met people like Anna who gave her and her kids a place to stay and a clean beds, and she gave them food and she took care of them, and she wanted to thank her for everything she does.
In New Haven, Eva Zamaris, News 8.
The King of Connecticut barbecue is back home after volunteering his time in Poland and Ukraine.
The cold, the homeless, the hungry were served warm meals by chefs from all over, including the CEO of Bear's Smokehouse, who has locations in Hartford, New Haven, and the suburbs. In the hours and days after Russia invaded Ukraine, the images of devastation and desperation were all over television and social media.
And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get involved, because I saw it and it was just like, I have to do something.
Jamie McDonald, who made a name for himself by creating the Bear's Smokehouse brand, jumped on a plane and flew to Poland. How did it change you as a person?
It was definitely life-changing. I've done similar things like through Operation Barbecue Relief, where I've gone down and fed like the people that had the flooding in West Virginia or like the hurricane that went through Miami. But this was a man-made disaster, and to see that suffering firsthand, you see it on the news, everybody saw it on the news.
McDonald volunteered with the World Central Kitchen, a charity which feeds victims of humanitarian, climate, and community disasters. He helped feed thousands of people by making a variety of items like stews, borscht, hot chocolate, even banana bread.
But that daily reminder of giving that person their meal and seeing the smile on their face, it's very not as helping them, but it rewards you back and it helps you kind of get through the day. But you see a lot of sad stuff and just a lot of struggles. So you could see it in their faces, the anxiety and the stress, and you could see them trying to hide their tears from their kids. So it's very sad.
McDonald told me the worst moment for him was when he witnessed the death of an elderly Ukrainian refugee. What was the worst thing you saw over there?
The worst thing, altogether it was, just the amount of women and children and elderly every day, and you just imagine just the trauma they're going through. But the worst thing I saw was at the train station one day, an elderly man passed away. His wife was there crying, and of course you don't want to intrude upon them, but later in the day I asked the local police officers, what had occurred, and they had said that he had made the trip, he had cancer, and made the trip even though his doctors told him, you can't leave because, you won't make it. But he was so concerned about his wife's safety, he pushed himself to do it, and he crossed the border and he passed away.
McDonald doesn't see an end to the misery anytime soon and tells me he is ready to serve again and again.
So you guys need me to come back, I'll be back.
Well, on behalf of everyone in Connecticut, we thank you for what you did.
Thank you.
It was an inspiring story.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And you can help feed the Ukrainians by donating at one of those restaurants. Well, for a Rocky Hill woman who's 89 years old, the images of the violence and the refugees streaming out of her homeland, Ukraine, is almost too much to bear.
It also brings her back to the start of World War II. News 8's Sarah Cody shares her story.
Reign of Terror, 1942.
89-year-old Melanie Kuzma reads from a book she wrote for her children.
Early spring began with a reign of terror by the Nazi regime against the Jewish population of Poland, Ukraine, and other Eastern European countries.
It's to teach them what she went through, what the world was like all those years ago.
It is important to me that my family know the kind of people we were, how we came to be in the United States.
The current images of destruction and brutality hitting home.
It brings everything back.
Kuzma's story is different, but with common themes.
Everybody was afraid. We couldn't go to church. The churches were closed. You know, it was awful.
In the early days of World War II, her parents did an extraordinary thing.
There were several people sitting on crates and suitcases right there in our cellar.
They hid 18 Jewish neighbors in their home in Ukraine, in the basement, the attic, and the carriage house.
Mama calmed me down and said, "Don't talk to anyone, whatever you saw, not even to anyone in the family. These are our friends, and we will shelter them until a safer place is found."
She doesn't know what happened to all of them. Her family had to flee Ukraine as well when she was 11 years old.
We just took whatever we had. We left everything in the house. It's happening again. It's all in my mind.
The images of Ukrainian children losing their sense of safety and security, almost too much to bear.
And it's very difficult. I have to put my mind somewhere else. I have to watch a movie, funny stories.
Kuzma has returned to her homeland. This trip in 2012 shows her touring Lviv, where she keeps in touch with family.
I talk to them at least twice a week.
Are you worried you'll lose contact with them?
Of course I am.
Kuzma can't believe she's seeing some aspects of history repeat themselves.
All I do is cry.
And is praying for change.
I wish it would end right now, because the capital city has not been destroyed. Because once that beautiful city goes, Ukraine is gone.
Magnificent architecture. We have another selection of Ukrainian music for you. This is Taran Kuzma playing the bandura, a 50-string folk harp that is the traditional national instrument of Ukraine. The song is called Remind Me, Bandura of My Native Land.
Welcome back. That painting was done by Ukrainian-American high school senior Marika Rudik of Andover. It shows a girl waving a Ukrainian flag in defiance of Russian planes.
Beautiful. Now to a couple from Old Lyme who once lived in Ukraine. They're trying unsuccessfully to reach friends there.
Sarah Cody introduces us to the Shrivers.
I said, there's no way that they're going to invade Ukraine. Impossible. And the morning they invaded, it was just stunning.
Dick Shriver of Old Lyme knows Ukraine well.
Mariupol is here.
The 88-year-old and his wife Barbara lived there for 8 years in the 90s, setting up not-for-profit merchant banks, teaching Ukrainians how to run small businesses.
It certainly was an adventure, but we had a purpose.
They were so welcoming, and a Ukrainian table is full of wonderful foods and everything.
While there, Barbara Shriver was a big supporter of the arts and has this collection, including a bright, happy piece painted after the fall of the USSR, a time of independence. Other pieces, like this haunting one, show oppression.
This was a little earlier, I think, during the dark times.
She worries that the destruction of cities means the loss of art and can't get in touch with a painter whose studio is in Kyiv.
He called it Little Mamart, and I'm afraid some of his art, his studio might be destroyed.
The Shrivers also possess these poignant political cartoons by Pulitzer Prize winner Matt Davies. This is Taras Shevchenko, an artist and poet bought out of serfdom who lived in the 1850s.
He's a hero in Ukraine.
It says, "I am suffering and tortured, but I am not humiliated." Isn't that amazing and indicative of what's going on today?
Isn't that something?
The Shrivers say Ukrainians are people who have a history of trying to move beyond corruption and government problems to build up, but face obstacles that stop progress. Shriver, who also worked in the office of the Secretary of Defense during Gerald Ford's presidency, blames one person, Vladimir Putin.
He's pure evil. This is brutality beyond our comprehension. It's not beyond their comprehension, it's beyond our comprehension.
Based on his experience, Shriver says anything can happen in this conflict.
Who knows? It could end tomorrow with an agreement acceptable to both parties. It could go on for 20 years.
Now, the Shrivers are also raising funds to send aid to Ukraine, and we've got information on how to donate on our website, WTNH.com.
Now to another performance by the Yevshan Ukrainian Vocal Ensemble. If you're a fan of Saturday Night Live, you may recognize it as a piece the Ukrainian choir sang during the cold open of the show back in February.
This is Prayer for Ukraine.
Ukrainian culture on full display in Hartford. This is the Zoloty Promin dance ensemble performing traditional Ukrainian dance on stage at the Bushnell at the Belding Theater. These kids ages 7 to 18 are from cities all across Connecticut, and they've been performing at benefit concerts for Ukraine all around our great state.
Well, today is International Pisanki Day for Peace Overseas, and it's all about those incredible, intricate Easter eggs that originated in Ukraine.
News 8's Sarah Cody sits down with a priest from Terryville to share more about the tradition and how it's being affected by the war.
This is a Ukrainian tradition called Pisanki. The tradition began pre-Christian times. The huge egg was like a symbol of, in a sense of like a universe.
Father Paul Luniu, raised in England of Ukrainian descent, has made hundreds, maybe thousands, of these incredible, colorful works of art.
Goose eggs, quail eggs, and also the tiny finch eggs over here. This is the 40 days of Lent. 40 eggs on this one ostrich egg.
It's just really
and some people have asked me, is that decal or did a computer do this? I said, it's all freehand.
Now we mostly see Pisanki eggs around Easter. People make them to protect homes. But this year, the tradition will obviously be very different in Ukraine.
What I've gathered so far is they are now packing the boxes up and hiding everything. Not only the eggs, the icons, the embroideries, anything, museum pieces are being hidden at the moment.
But Luniu, the priest at Terryville St. Michael Ukrainian Church, has heard that Polish schools are trying to keep up the practice for young Ukrainian refugees.
What the world is doing now is supporting Ukraine, supporting those poor children, supporting those families, broken families indeed, which is going to take years to sort of restore back to some form of normality.
During this difficult time, Luniu is also turning to his art, which he shared with the Pope.
He asked me what it means, how I did it.
For reflection and perspective.
What do you get out of making these?
It's the intricacy, the meaning, and a peace of mind and heart. This is the kistka.
A stylus is warmed in a flame, then dipped in beeswax to make shapes on the egg.
Some patterns I followed, but sometimes I make up my own patterns as well.
When the egg is dipped and dyed, the beeswax-covered area is preserved. Luniu may make 6 or 7 layers. Then the wax is melted off.
You take the egg, and at the side of the flame, you just rub it like this. When you take the wax off and you see the beauty that's being created, there's a great sense of joy and satisfaction and peace that comes over doing these eggs.
There's a legend about the eggs, about a place where an evil figure is tied with chains to rocks.
So we're praying that people all over the world will paint eggs so those chains tighten, so this monster doesn't get hold of everything all over the world.
Life imitating art, so poignant right now. In Terryville, Sarah Cody, News 8.
Those eggs are gorgeous, aren't they?
So beautiful, and what a tradition.
Absolutely.
All right, we want to mention an event this Sunday at 11 a.m. at the Cathedral of St. Joseph in Hartford. A mass and prayer service for Ukraine, followed by a concert.
This is featuring the St. Joseph Cathedral Choir, violin virtuoso Solomia Ivakiv of Yukon, Grammy Award-winning recording artist Paul Winter, and a short selection by the Yevshan Ukrainian Vocal Ensemble.
Thank you for joining us, and we want to thank Alex Kuzma, Myron Melnick, and the entire Ukrainian-American community here in Connecticut.
Now a performance by Dr. Ivakiv. The song is called Melody by Ukrainian composer Miroslav Skorik. It's become one of the nation's spiritual anthems.